The Blind Tony Story, Book 7, Chapter 3. Now, every time I always returned home to Atlantic City, it was always to a hero's welcome, whether I was a well-traveled, seasoned political activist or a successful drug dealer. People were just glad to see me, and I always had something to give to everybody. Even if it was only a kind word, some advice, or even just a smile. But now, I had nothing to give to anybody, and I was forever looking to take. One of the chief characteristics of a dope fiend is his selfish inability to give. He's always looking to take, and if he does have something to give, there will always be strings attached. And whatever he's offering is minute and minuscule compared to what he's going to be asking for in return. He's usually whining and complaining and making excuses. And he always portrays himself as the victim who would never ever steal from or harm anyone, even though that's all he ever continually does. They love to procrastinate, and they're master manipulators who think that they're smarter than everybody else. And they believe that people really can't see through their shallow facades. I once wrote a poem about a dope fiend called The Creature, and it went like this. There once was a creature with claws and sharp teeth, cunning and crafty with the ways of a thief. A cold, vicious nature ran straight to its core, and its bite almost always was worse than its roar. Those who have seen him are quick to retreat. They barricade their homes and they give him the street. He looks almost human when you look in his eyes, and he plays to your heart with his tear-jerking lies. Blam! Then you're evicted in the twinkling of an eye. The creature's then gone. He loves you. Bye-bye. But when that creature's asleep, he's beautiful to see. I'm one who knows because that creature's in me. Yeah. Anyway, everybody I came in contact with, you know, I took something from. Before, everything I touched seemed to turn to gold. Now, everything I touch seemed to wither and die if I continually stayed in his presence. There's a curse in the Bible that talks about the land no longer yielding its fruit or produce, and God no longer listening to the people's prayers. He said that the earth gets turned into iron and the sky gets turned into bronze. And he said, no matter what you tried to do, it will not prosper. It won't produce anything positive, and no matter how you cry out to God, he's going to refuse to listen. Well, that's exactly what it felt like had happened to me at this point in time. I ran into Aaron again. He now had a new business, a real estate office. He also had a girlfriend. Wow, this was great. I had never known Aaron to have a girlfriend before. Her name was Talithia, and he was very much in love, and she was beautiful. Very nice. But I was too selfishly caught up in my own reality to really pay much attention. Still, I was happy that he had finally found himself a girl. Aaron couldn't offer me a job because I didn't have a real estate license. But he did give me a really nice place to stay in Ventnor. And he also got me a job as a waiter at one of his friend's businesses. I stole Talithia's bike and sold it for drugs. I also lost that job that he got me. And then I ran into James, who used to be the lead vocalist and keyboard player for our old band. And he got me a job at the liquor store where he worked. And he also let me stay at his place. I got fired from the liquor store. And because the owners of the liquor store were also his landlord, I had to move from there. Then I started living in an old abandoned car, not far from his house. And I got a job teaching tennis at the soldiers' home. And I was doing something I really like doing now. I also came in contact with some key people who made some positive things happen for me. And it looked like life was about to turn around for me. But then winter came. and I was still living in that abandoned car. And then I ran into Ronnie, who used to be the lead guitar player for our band. He was now producing shows for the casinos, and he was doing very well. He still lived in the inlet section, and he had turned his family's old house into a studio. So we jammed for a while, and then he gave me some money, and he also gave me a flute. And that flute became a magical entity. I was now able to go on the boardwalk and play music and get paid lovely, day or night, winter or spring. It was definitely a cash cow, and I got paid enough to support my drug habit and still have money left over. But even so, I still continued to live in that abandoned car. In the winter, it was cold, and in the summer, it was very hot, and the mosquitoes were driving me crazy. I would still bathe regularly and change my clothes daily whenever and wherever I could, mainly in public restrooms on the boardwalk and also in the casinos. My sister Pat and her husband had won the lottery for a house. Not that they gave them a free house, but they had displaced so many people when gambling came in that they set aside a certain amount of affordable housing and made that available to qualified buyers based on names drawn from a hat. So they had been in their new home now for a few years, and they had a daughter about Niecy's age. I didn't socialize with them too much because, as I said earlier in the book, Otis and I always had beef between us. But I did pass through when my nephew Keith came home from the service. He had been stationed in Germany, and he now had a very nice stereo system and a lot of good photography equipment. As I said before, I loved Keith a lot, and I always considered him my little baby. He and my brother Mike and I got together on several occasions, and I offered them both some weed. But they both have always avoided all drugs, and for this I'm very, very glad. My sister's husband Otis got very sick. He developed prostate cancer, and before too long, he was no longer able to work. He and my sister had to travel to Northfield regularly so he could get his chemotherapy and radiation treatments. Before long, his condition improved, and he was even able to go back to work again. But it didn't last long. Things took a turn for the worse, and he rapidly deteriorated and went from a strong 6 foot, 200+ man to a fragile, emaciated, pamper-wearing shell of his former self, curled into a fetal position in a crib-like bed. He was allowed to come home to die, and my sister became his outer strength. But she too was drained and was slowly dying as the love of her life was slowly slipping away. Our whole family gathered together at her home to show support and to lend a hand, me included. And I asked my sister Pat if I could be alone with Otis for a little while. He was on a very strong pain medication at this point, but his eyes were still alert. I spoke and he listened. I begged and he forgave. I apologized for all my years of hardness towards him, and I commended him on the fine job he had done taking care of my sister and raising the kids and building a home for the entire family. And I held his hand and looked into his eyes and told him that I loved him, and I begged for his forgiveness once again. And a funny thing happened. He forgave me. He harbored no animosity towards me at all, and we both cried, and we both found peace. And that same night he died. God is good. The next day I came back to her house to steal all his medications because they were morphine-based. And that was like synthetic heroin. On the streets, it was very, very valuable. But my sister and the home health attendant had expeditiously disposed of all his medications as soon as he had died. So I was out of luck. I continued to play my music on the boardwalk, and I started to draw regular crowds. You remember Randy, the drummer that we had in the band a long time ago that we nicknamed the Monster? Well, he had a younger brother who was an even better percussionist than he was. Wow, it's hard to believe. He and I started playing on the boardwalk together. He played bongos, and we got paid lovely. And eventually, I moved out of that abandoned car, and I moved into his house. But one night in the dead of winter, in the middle of a snowstorm, I got stressed out and pawned my flute for some drugs, and I never got it back again. Things went downhill from there. I invested the last of my money in a drug deal and got ripped off. And then I had to call my sister and tell her that I had stabbed the boy. Wow, she was pissed. But she did give me $350. And she said that was all her savings and to never ask her for any money again. I ended up going to a friend named Butch up in the inlet. And I told him what had happened. And I also told him that I needed to take a shower and I needed to change the clothes. And he also called his cousin, who was a detective on the police force, Bardu. We had all grown up together and we were all friends, including the detective. And he said, yeah, boy got stabbed, but he didn't die. And so I should just turn myself in to him the next day and he would guarantee that I would be treated fairly and be okay. And I agreed. But however, I left for New York that same night. I couldn't see turning myself into the police.